this isn't about wealth. It's not a wealth course. It's not about how to get wealthy. It can be. You might use it to get wealthy, honestly, but it's just about to get what you want out of life. And I think I'm going to echo what you said about people really struggling with confronting what's going on in their life and confronting that they are the reason why they are where they are. Because the truth is, you only need to look at the results. Look at the results that you've produced in your life. And if you're not happy with them, then ask yourself if you want more of that or if you want something different. Welcome to our podcast, proudly brought to you by VPA Australia, our trusted supplement provider since Unity Gym started. As sponsored athletes, we're excited to offer you a special 10% discount on top quality supplements that ship worldwide. Just use our discount code from the description. To avoid international shipping fees, contact VPA and tell them we sent you to get a flat shipping rate. Today's episode is also sponsored by the Flexibility Blueprint. Ever felt lost in the sea of social media fitness advice? The Flexibility Blueprint is your map to progress, designed to help you get laser focused on what matters most for your journey in flexibility and strength. And guess what? It's free. Grab it using the link in the description. If you're starting your flexibility journey, don't miss our 20-minute mobility routine. It's your first step to quick wins in flexibility. For those further along, use our Flexibility Masterclass, featuring advanced techniques like loaded stretching and end range strength for the pancake, front splits, middle splits, and more. Links for both are also in the description. And for the seasoned athletes, avoid the frustration of complex training puzzles with our UMS Tribe membership. It's a different online coaching experience with strength and flexibility combined. Don't forget, we're Amazon affiliates too. You can find all the equipment used in our videos and podcasts at the most competitive prices with our affiliate links in the description. Now let's dive into today's episode. 10 years ago, Yani and I were drowning in credit card debts, addicted to drugs and alcohol, and frankly, heading in a really bad direction. We hit an inflection point where we both experienced a radical transformation, and now we're going to share our 7 life-changing, transformative steps with you. It's all in the Peak Potential Planner, which is part of the UMS Tribe membership. And considering that it's a new year just around the corner, or probably a new year when you're listening to this, we thought it's a good time to share it with you. So today we're going to talk about the first step that started this whole process for Yani, because it was really Yani that had an experience when he went and met T Harv Ecker, or went to his workshop, The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. Talk us through that, Yani. What was that experience like for you? Well, talk us through where you were when you went to that first.
Yeah, look, this is the preload. This is actually not one of the 7 steps, but it's probably the most important. The way I've laid out the Peak Potential Planner is it's effectively like a goal setting tool, and it's designed to align your vision of where you want to be in 5 or 10 years with your goals, and then the actions that you're doing on a daily basis, and make sure that all aligns with your core values, because if it doesn't, then it's never going to work. But this is not one of the 7 steps. This is a prelude in the workshop, in the program, because what I've found is that the biggest breakthrough for me was the realization, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Rad, the realization that the way I was thinking and behaving and was basically the cause of where we were in our lives. And at this time in my life, we were just talking off camera about this, just prior. It was about when I was about 33, and I was just about to have. I just found out that my partner was pregnant with our first child, and I was drowning in debt. My personal credit card debt had hit about $55,000. We had a family history of terrible financial mismanagement, and our father had gone bankrupt from enormous credit card debts. We had just grown up with this mentality that it was just totally okay to spend more than you earn. And I didn't have any clue whatsoever that it was a blueprint that had been formed over the years of my upbringing, my influences, all these things that needed to be changed. And Rad, we used to say this to ourselves, each other all the time. It didn't matter how much money we made; we were always broke. We had periods in our early personal training careers where we would just where we'd make stacks of cash, but we just spent more and more of it. And this concept of having a mental blueprint, it really can be for anything, and it is for everything. What you'll find is you've got a blueprint for everything. Now, the thing that made the biggest change or shift for me was around finances. Now, it doesn't have to be around finances for you. It might be around health, it might be around relationships, it might be around religion, it might be around whatever. But you'll have something that is the tipping point, that when you realize that you have this blueprint that's affecting the outcomes in your life, and until you change that blueprint, until you rewrite that blueprint with something that's more beneficial, then you just won't realize the power of this. And for me, it was related to finance, because I was just in such a bad financial state, and I just couldn't seem to get myself out of it. No matter what I tried, no matter what job I got, no matter what my income was, I was always broke and going backwards and getting into more and more debt. And it wasn't until I went to this crazy workshop that, believe it or not, was the ticket was, I didn't even buy the ticket. The ticket was given to me by a friend and mentor at the time, who was actually a personal training client of mine. Shout out to you, Paul, because this started everything. He said, do you want to go along to this workshop? I actually bought tickets to it. I can't make it. He was the CEO of quite a successful company that was really on the rise at the time, and he was very busy. And he was also studying, doing a degree in business and economics or something like that. And I thought, what is this crap? I didn't even do any research. I had no idea what I was in for. And I went to this thing, and it was just wild. And it piqued my interest. It sparked my interest. And the reason why was because he spoke about whether Harv has German descendancy, or whether one of the keynote speakers had German descendancy, and they shared a story of the fact that many German adults that are our father's age, who is German, our father is from Germany, have a terrible financial blueprint because of the collapse of their economy and their franc. After the war, after the Second World War, they had hyperinflation. I'm sure you can all, it doesn't, you can Google it, but you'd need a wheelbarrow full of cash to go and do your grocery shopping in Germany during this period of time. It was an absolute disaster. And now in Germany, they use euros. They don't have their local currency anymore, as far as I know. Anyway, this is what caught my attention. Everything in this workshop felt really confronting to me until this point, when this guy spoke, because all of a sudden I could relate to it. And all of a sudden I went, holy crap, this is really quite similar to our story. Our father just used to throw his hands up in the air and go, yeah, I just don't get money, and he went bankrupt when we were in I think maybe our 20s, Rad, is that right? It was quite
20s.
traumatic. It was quite traumatic for all of us living under the same roof. And my father was enormously stressed, suffering these crippling migraines due to his stress and anxiety and all of this around money, and his business was collapsing, and it was just a horrible thing to experience. And the good thing that came out of all that was that I just never wanted to follow in those footsteps, which gave me the audacity to challenge this blueprint and go, hang on, maybe there's something in this. So the reason why I'm sharing this financial story is because I thought, okay, what have I got to lose? I'm going to just really take on board what this guy's teaching at this 3-day workshop. It was one of those workshops that was so out there and hyperbolic that there was a large portion of people that just didn't even turn up on the last day because they were like, oh, this guy's just this crap. You know, he talks about money in a very spiritual way. Money is an energy source that either flows to you or through you. There was all these terms that most people just couldn't get over. And I thought, you know what have I got to lose? Like, I am in such a bad financial state. I'm just going to really absorb this and take it on board. I left that workshop and went one step further and bought Harv's book, which is of the same name as the workshop. It's called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. And I've since given a copy to everyone in my family. It was such a revolutionary moment for me because he does talk about these blueprints, and they can be a mindset, whatever you want to call it, you know, to do with your psychology. But it's basically created by your upbringing. It's created by your experiences, and it essentially it is the cause of everything in your life. You know, you may have heard someone say to you at some point in your life, "You are the reason for everything that's happening to you." You know, you are the cause of your experiences of the outcomes in your life. And a lot of people find that very hard to deal with, but the reality is it's most likely true. So I came out of that workshop. I was very committed to really going deep into this, studying it further. And yeah, it was the first step. It was the first step. And so the reason why we've used this as the prelude to the 7 steps is because I think if you don't understand that there are these sort of blueprints or these psychologies, or Kerwin Ray called them stories, that we have in our head about certain topics that they may be, and don't get me wrong, that they can actually be very beneficial. You might be brought up in a household that has really good money management, and you've got a really good, healthy financial blueprint that's serving you well. I'm referring to the stories or the blueprints that aren't serving you very well. And for a lot of the people that we deal with, it's around health. You know, your health is in a very bad state. Therefore, what's going on inside your head has to change first before anything physical is going to change. And you may have really bad, unhealthy relationships. You may struggle to remain in a healthy, loving relationship. You find conflict all the time. Whatever it is. You know, I'm sure you can think of other areas in your life that you have a mindset, stories, or blueprints that aren't serving you very well. And this was the big first step for me. And I think it's going to be the big first step for everyone, because if you're not willing to come to a place where you accept that what you're experiencing in your life is a direct reflection of who you are and what you think and what you believe, then I think you're probably unlikely to change much. If you're looking to change, if you're looking for a transformation, if you're looking to break a barrier or a plateau or a point that you haven't been able to break through before, the first step is to get your head screwed on. Rad, I feel like I'm just absolutely dominating the mic here, and this is a journey that both Rad and I went through together. Now, the only reason why I led the charge was because I was the one working with the mentors, I reckon. And
Yeah,
that
it's just
had,
that you started with that. When we, back when we were in our mid-30s, you had exposure to mentors before I did. For me, it was all, my mentors were always around movement, around training. Back then it was mostly Kung Fu. And I started to, the next mentor that I really met, that really influenced where I was going, was Ido Portal, which was a huge influence for me in my 30s. But yeah, you were learning from mentors that weren't to do with training and with physicality, with personal training, with being a coach before I was. And I wasn't as interested in it as you were to start with, because for the same reason as when you went to the workshop and your attitude was like, well, what's this about? When I saw you and you were talking about it, it was the same thing. But when I started to see the results in your life, that's when I started to really notice a difference, because you and I were making the same amount of money, but you were getting well ahead of me. And that was like, wow, okay, there's something to this. And to be clear, like we said, Yanni's, we've used this example because this is the peak potential planner, and the lessons herein are things that Yani and I directly used to completely transform our lives in the last decade. And this isn't about wealth. It's not a wealth course. It's not about how to get wealthy. It can be. You might use it to get wealthy, honestly, but it's just about to get what you want out of life. And I think I'm going to echo what you said about people really struggling with confronting what's going on in their life and confronting that they are the reason why they are where they are. Because the truth is, you only need to look at the results. Look at the results that you've produced in your life. And if you're not happy with them, then ask yourself if you want more of that or if you want something different. Because I've had to go through this myself. I've had to go through this same realization. I've had to go through this realization with my physical results, like what I produce with my training, because I wasn't being consistent with my training and I wasn't following good programming at a time, not anymore. And I had to take a very hard look and say, well, I'm not doing the right things, am I? I'm not getting the results that I would hope I'd get from turning up. And you have to look at it and think, all right, I'm going to need to learn from somebody that can teach me something better, and I'm going to need to change what I'm doing. And I've had to go through it with relationships. I've had to go through it with finances, with business. It's been a big one for business as well for me and for Yani. So yeah, I absolutely agree.
I actually realize, and something that I don't speak about publicly a lot, but the people in our circle, in our tribe, and in our inner circle definitely know. But I realize now on reflection that maybe the reason why I was the first to step into this realm of personal development was because it was, for me, it was kind of life or death because of my depression. I was diagnosed with clinical depression at 21, but I'd suffered it for as long as I can recall, even as a child. And it was something that, in hindsight, was managed through the amount of exercise that we were doing. I don't have the same passion for exercise that Rad has, but I certainly have exercised as much as him, at sometimes even more in my life. And I realize now that a lot of that was to do with my psychology. I just felt awful mentally when I wasn't exercising. And so it started for us with combat sports at a very young age. I think we were doing a martial art at like 6 years old, like judo at 6 and 8. Like, it was really early that we started doing a form of combat sport or martial art. And then it just continued through. I moved to Taekwondo for a short period, then karate, then kickboxing, then boxing, and dabbled in a few little martial arts, Wing Chun, and a few things like that, in and out. But I generally stuck with my boxing. I really enjoyed that. And then in my early 20s, maybe it was late teens, I started lifting some weights at the gym. Didn't know anything, probably caused more harm than good. But I was always, and throughout that whole time, I played rugby league and soccer as well, and a bit of cricket and all sorts of stuff. So the sport was what was managing the depression. I didn't know this at the time. And then when I sort of hit that period of my life in my early 20s, where I started to like smoke weed and drink a lot, and just, you do all the things that you do when you're 21, it just really, what I think what happened was I stopped exercising for a period of time, for the very first time in my entire life. I just didn't have time. I think Rad and I both copped the wrath from your martial arts instructor. Your kung fu instructor at one point threatened to kick you out. My boxing coach kicked me out of the gym because I was drinking and partying and turning up just half-assed, at that period of time. And he just said, I've got no time for this. And so I thought, oh, well, I don't want it. I don't want to box anymore. And I stopped doing it for a couple of years. And that's when the depression really took control of me for the very first time. And that's when I actually went to the doctor for the first time. There was all sorts of stuff that I won't share on this podcast that happened, but it was life or death for me, And so then, going through my 20s, as responsibilities get bigger, you become an adult and things get tougher, unfortunately, the psychology gets more challenging to bear and to manage. And I started to think, well, I need to figure this out. Like, I need to figure out what's going on in my head. And so that was, I think, the trigger that pushed me down the path of, personal development, and starting to expand my awareness around my mind, my thoughts, what was going on. And so maybe that is why I was a little bit more receptive to it in the beginning stage, because I do recall that I used to come back from these workshops and mentoring sessions, and just, it was like for poor Rad, it was like taking a drink from a fire hose. I was just so passionate about what I'd learned or heard, and I was trying to, get him to adopt those things into his life, and he was just like, dude, slow down, and a lot of the stuff is quite out there when you're not used to it, so yeah, I think maybe that's that could be a reason why. But you're probably thinking, well, what happened after that workshop? I think at the point where I started turning it around, and I actually, literally, people talk about you've got to freeze your credit cards. I had 5 credit cards because I was playing the interest-free period merry-go-round, where you just transfer your debt to from one credit card to another, taking advantage of interest-free periods or low interest periods, so you're not paying as much interest. And I thought I was an absolute legend for that. Anyway, I came out of this workshop, and one of the steps that this guy talked about was to literally freeze your credit card. He wants you to cut them up, but to freeze them. And so I poured all my credit cards into a Tupperware container about this big, filled it up with water, stirred it up, put it in the freezer. So they were all frozen in this big block of ice. You might laugh at that, but it actually worked. Like, I couldn't use the credit cards. And in 2 years, without increasing my income, and we were on low income, we were bouncing around $55,000 to $70,000 of income through that period. Less, probably $55,000 to $65,000 of income.
Which we should clarify for those in America, because that's probably a really good wage in America. That's a low wage in Australia.
That's about $35,000-$40,000 in America.
Yeah.
Maybe less. Yeah. It's a very low income, in comparison to the norm, because we were starting a new business and we just had no cash flow, and without increasing my income at all, I paid off every cent of that credit card debt within 2 years, just over 2 years. Now, I did some radical, some would say extremist sacrificing. Part of it was that I moved back in with my father and we split the rent at home because he needed a bit of financial help too. I lived on very little. I lived on whatever I could survive on. I went from only eating organic, expensive food to, eating absolute garbage, just whatever I could do to get through that period, because I just made it my absolute number one priority. And it was an enormously liberating experience. I started tracking every single cent, every single dollar that went through me, in a spreadsheet. Because it created a visceral reaction to me, this concept that Harv taught of money is either flowing through you or it's flowing to you, and you can control that outcome. And so I needed to see where that money was going, what I was doing with it. Now, I know of a lot of people who have had to do the same thing with calories in order to get themselves in shape. They've had to track every single calorie because it's the only way that you create this visceral reaction to consuming, over-consuming, or in my case, overspending, and it worked. It worked incredibly well. And it didn't just work well, over the next decade, I created enormous financial freedom. And I went from one extreme of being in a massive amount of debt, which was increasing rapidly, not decreasing or plateauing, to having absolutely zero debt, not a cent of debt, and quite a lot of financial freedom, which is something that I think anyone can do. And you can do it, you know, in your health, you can do it in your beliefs, in your religion, you can do it in your spirituality, in your relationships. I truly believe that if you reset the blueprint that's not serving you well in order to achieve your goals, you can transform any area of your life more radically. Most people overestimate what they can achieve in 1 year and completely underestimate what they can achieve in 10. Would you agree, Rad?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's I think it's funny because when people say, "Oh, I can't do that. I can't do that change. I've tried this. I've tried changing what I eat. I've tried going to the gym." And I always just think to myself, I don't always say it because it depends on whether the person's ready to hear it or not. But I always think to myself, you're not desperate yet. You're just not desperate. Because if you were desperate, you'd do the work. And it's funny because desperation is a powerful place to act from. When you're desperate, like, there's all these metaphors that people use, of, if your life depended on it, you could do it. If there was a car that was on top of your child, you'd find the strength to act or whatever it is. And yeah, I think desperation is a very powerful place to be because I know it was desperation that got me to act and change my beliefs. And that's what we're going to go into in this. The whole purpose of this episode was to really just frame what this series is about, because in the next 7 episodes in this series, we're going to go through the 7 steps that we took in order that completely transformed the way that we think, the way that we believe, and the way that we behave to create radical change, incredible transformation in business, in finances, in health, in wealth, in relationships. Yep. So yeah, if you got something out of this and you want to know more, you go through the series and
come on the journey with us.
Come on the journey. And so you can listen to this podcast series for free, of course. And if you want to get the Peak Potential Planner and work with Yani and I and get access to the workshop that Yani does to take people through it, come and join the UMS Tribe membership. You can get a free trial if you use the link in the description of this podcast. And if you got something out of this, if you got inspired by this at all, if you want to listen to more, share it with somebody else that you think could benefit from it as well. Because, obviously we put a lot of really good content out for free, and the only thing we ask for in return is that you share it with your friends. So please take a moment right now, hit the share button, copy the link, and forward it onto someone. Do that right now, please.
Just before we finish, I'll share one quick anecdotal case study. We had a friend of ours. I won't name him because I haven't asked if I have permission to do this, but he was a longtime client of ours in the gym who was working in the legal field. He was a partner in a firm, a successful firm, and he was dissatisfied with his life, not because of his income. He was a very, wealthy, maybe not wealthy, but he had a very high income, much higher than I've ever had in my professional life. But what he was dissatisfied with was the amount of time he'd spent with his children. At the time that I sat down with him, and I remember this distinctly, I sat down at the cafe across the road from our gym, and he almost broke down into tears because he had seen how much time Rad and I were spending with our kids in the gym. We had our children when they were young in the gym with us almost all day. And he said, you have no idea how rare that is for someone of your success level. Most parents sacrifice that time early with their children to create wealth. And you guys seem to have cracked the code. You've figured it out, And, my children are 6 and 8 now, and I hardly know them. I've left every morning to go to work before they wake up, and I've come home every night during the week before after they've gone to bed. And on the weekend, I'm so exhausted, and I tend to end up having to get called into work as well. And I just don't know how to change it. I don't know. My whole lifestyle relies on this scenario that I'm in to continue. And anyway, long story short, I released a very, very thrown together mishmash version of the Peak Potential Planner years ago as a test run, a test pilot. And He went and he actually executed without even telling me. He executed on it. We released it in a podcast series, and he went ahead and just worked through it and really diligently did it. He had to leave the gym around that time, and I think maybe that was why we were having the lunch, because he was saying goodbye and he was moving and would no longer be able to get there. And about 6 to 8 months later, I don't know if you remember this, Rad, but about 6 to 8 months later, I received an email from him, and it almost brought me to tears. In that period of time, he had mentioned that he'd always wanted to start his own firm, but just didn't have the confidence to do it on his own. Anyway, he went through that whole process. He went and quit his job, started his own firm, and was now running an office from his home and spending every waking hour with his children and making the same money, believe it or not, had the same income. And he just was so thankful and couldn't, he kept saying, it's because of that series that you did, that podcast series, that I'm in this position now. I never would have done it otherwise. And he was so thankful. And yeah, it really almost brought me to tears. And that is just one anecdotal case study of how powerful this is. I swear to you that if you go through this and you really embrace it, it has the potential to completely transform anything in your life that you're dissatisfied with.
Absolutely. All right, look out for the next episode, and we'll see you soon. Have a great day, everyone.